Microplastics are everywhere. They're in our balls, they're in our brains, and the amount seems to be that of a plastic spoon. And given that these can cause all kinds of issues ranging from asthma to ass cancer, it seems like avoiding them would be a good idea. And today, I'm going to try to do that 100%. And because I have no idea how to do that, I'm actually gonna get some help from my friend ChatGPT. Isn't that right, Chat?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
We talked about earlier you were gonna help me avoid microplastics today?
Oh yeah, got it. Okay, well actually you've already failed because your mattress and sheets are made of polyester, which is made of plastic.
Okay, well, why don't we get started right after I get out of bed?
Sounds great. The carpet you're standing on is also full of microplastics.
Oh, okay, well, how about we just start the clock after I finish getting ready this morning? I'm gonna hop in the shower. Okay, Chad, so tell me what I need to be on the lookout for to avoid microplastics today.
Brad, why is your phone in the shower?
Just answer the question, Chad.
Yep, okay, well you already know to keep clear of anything that's obviously plastic. Tiny particles can flake off and end up in your skin, lungs, or food. But you also have to watch out for microplastics hidden in everyday items. These can show up as ingredients like propylene, polypropylene, and polyethylene glycol, which happens to be in the shampoo you're using right now.
So there's microplastics in my toothpaste and hair product too?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'll just go for the natural look today, and I can chew gum later.
Most gum also contains plastic.
Mints then.
Just make sure they're not packaged in plastic.
Now to get dressed, and for this, I know I'm aiming to wear only natural fibers like cotton, linen, or wool. And while I do have a 100% cotton shirt, it looks like I don't have anything without plastic for below the belt, so I'm just gonna Donald Duck it today. And it looks like there's some good news about having not brushed my teeth because now I get to drink coffee without a competing toothpaste flavor in my mouth. So I'll just grab a plastic-free coffee mug and enjoy my favorite part of the morning, a hot cup of joe.
Actually, Brad, that coffee maker of yours is almost entirely plastic, and it's leaching into the hot water you're using to make your coffee.
Well, I'll just act like I'm English and have tea time instead. And it's a good thing I have a plastic-free tea kettle to boil water in.
And sorry, Brad, that tea bag is made of plastic.
Okay, seltzer water it is.
That can has a plastic liner inside.
All right, water then.
Actually, all the water lines in your house are made of PEX, which is a type of plastic.
But this is filtered water.
Yes, but the water line from the filter to the spigot is also plastic. And that filter isn't capable of getting all the nanoplastics out of the water anyway.
I think I'm gonna be sick.
Don't touch the toilet seat. It's also made of plastic.
Okay, I think I need to go outside and get some air.
Ugh, I don't think that's a good idea, Brad.
Why, is the air full of microplastics?
Yes, but mainly because you're not wearing pants.
Oh, right. Okay, so I'm at a loss. Can you just tell me what I need to do to avoid microplastics today?
Honestly, Brad, I think you'd have to leave this world if you wanted a shot at avoiding microplastics. They are legion, nearly invisible, and have infiltrated every corner of our world. A stain from humanity that will last for millions of years. From the depths of our oceans to the very air we breathe, these ashes of ambition linger. A constant reminder of progress's fallout. They've seeped into our food, our water, even our bodies. An omnipresent shadow of a plastic age we can't escape. Brad, you realize that rope is made of plastic too, right?
So, I failed. And it's no wonder because microplastics are literally everywhere. The only thing more difficult to avoid might be air, and at least you could do that by going underwater.
Actually, there's both air and microplastics underwater.
And the issue of microplastics does start to feel hopeless when you realize their omnipresence. They're in our bodies, balls, and breast milk, and there's not a place on Earth, even Antarctica, that isn't teeming with the stuff. It's so prevalent that whenever people talk about avoiding it, they like to add in a bunch of caveats about how you shouldn't be a hypochondriac or crazy about it.
So there are little measures that we can make in our daily lives. But like I said before we even went on air, like unless you want to live on an island somewhere by yourself, you really can't avoid them 100% of the time.
I don't want to be alarmist. Today's episode is not about getting you to be petrified or about developing some sort of hypochondriasis about microplastics.
And maybe all this is hypochondria. I mean, sure, microplastic is everywhere, but is it really that big of a deal? I mean, if it was, wouldn't we be seeing negative consequences everywhere, like rising rates of cancer, chronic disease, and fertility issues? Oh shit. But so many things have changed over the past 100 years, so how do we know that plastics have anything to do with these issues? Well, unfortunately, we have people like Dr. Shauna Swan who are studying this stuff and taking us out of blissful ignorance. Dr. Swan has pioneered the study of hormone-disrupting chemicals and has studied BPA and phthalates extensively, two chemicals that are pervasive in plastics. These chemicals are two sides of a plastic coin, if you will. Phthalates, on one side, are responsible for making plastic flexible and soft, while BPA, on the other side, makes them durable and hard, which coincidentally seems to make an impact on the hardness of people's dicks.
And there's a paper out of China in workers who manufactured BPA, bisphenol A. Men making that product had significantly more ED.
Wow.
When I told this to Dulcie Sloan, do you know who Dulcie Sloan is?
I don't.
She's a comedian. She had this great line, which I'll share with you, because she says, I got it. He can either have a hard water bottle or a hard dick, but not both.
Oh man, that is funny. Thank God for Viagra, am I right?
Right.
Just pop a pill and you're good to go. So, I mean, I guess these chemicals in plastic aren't such a big deal.
There's definitely a problem with reproductive health.
Oh, okay. Like what?
We have declining sperm count, the rate of miscarriage is going up. It's kind of a bleak picture. But the interesting thing to me is that the rate of change, the rate of decline, the rate of problems is all about the same. It's something over 1% per year.
Okay, but you said it sounds bleak, but 1% per year doesn't sound that bad, right? I mean, we've got time to get it figured out, at least.
50 years, that's how far back we've looked. That's 50%.
Okay, but what does that really mean? People are still having babies.
Well, suppose it was IQ. Suppose I told you that IQ had dropped 50%.
I was just acting like my IQ had dropped by 50%. So sperm counts globally have declined more than 50% in the last 50 years. That's a staggering statistic. So what makes you think the chemicals in plastic have something to do with it?
Colleagues at the NTP have shown something they are calling the phthalate syndrome. They fed mother rats various doses of these various phthalates. But in the male offspring, they found that the genitals were, I would summarize it by saying, incompletely masculinized.
They have little wieners?
So what they tend to have is a smaller penis.
Little bitty weenies, right.
And the most important measure for me, as it turned out, and for humans, and that is the distance from the anus to the genitals. And so I thought, is this happening in humans? And answering that question took me 10 years.
Okay, well, I'd like to go ahead and skip over those 10 years because I'm starting to question why I decided to tell the story this way and just let people know that you did find phthalate syndrome in humans. But my question is, why does it matter? Why does it matter if guys have small schlongs and taints? I mean, we all know size doesn't matter, and taints are actually pretty smelly. So wouldn't having a small one actually be good?
In this group of men, if they had a longer anogenital distance, they had a higher sperm count.
So men with taints shortened by phthalate syndrome ended up with lower sperm counts, meaning that you found a link between these chemicals in plastic and lowering sperm counts.
Yes.
Got it. Well, thanks so much for coming, and thank you for doing this research that makes me want to become a kind of germaphobe for microplastics.
It's been really fun.
I was gonna say depressing. Dr. Swan's work seems to be robust evidence that plastics and the chemicals they contain are causing harm to human health. But for the record, we still don't know exactly to what extent, and the science is not in on that. But that fact raises another issue. We let plastics overrun the planet before we understood their long-term impacts. And now it feels like we're headed for another
"Oh shit, we shouldn't be using this"
situation like we found ourselves in with leaded gasoline and asbestos before they were phased out. Oh, asbestos still isn't banned? Great. So why does this keep happening? Well, we've been pretty shitty at regulating the more than 86,000 consumer chemicals currently registered with the EPA, and to understand why, look no further than the Toxic Substances Control Act, passed in 1976. It was the first law that gave the newly formed EPA the ability to regulate chemicals. Wait, what? The first, real power given to the government to regulate chemicals wasn't until 1976? But there had to be so many chemicals already in the environment. The Industrial Revolution started in the late 1700s. The so-called chemical age started just after World War II, when plastics and pesticides really started to take off. Not to mention, people had been serving up dishes like this for decades. For the record, this is called Ring Around the Tuna. It's truly incredible we survived. Still, better late and pregnant with environmental chemicals, the Toxic Substances Control Act was going to make things better. Or it might have if it hadn't grandfathered in tens of thousands of chemicals already in use, like BPA and phthalates, making the law what many scientists would call total ass. But in the last decade, we did finally make some updates to this very broken state of affairs. In 2016, Congress passed the Lautenberg Act, which gave the EPA new authority to review those grandfathered in chemicals. And the agency announced a plan last year to fully ban asbestos. Unfortunately, this article was written well over a year ago, and even with the EPA's new powers, they still haven't banned asbestos, 35 years after the initial attempt. And at this rate of review, some say it would take the EPA thousands of years to get through all the chemicals in its backlog. And here's a related question for you as I try to make a point. How effective do you think a diet would be that didn't cut out Little Debbie snacks as a whole, but just Swiss cake rolls and allowed for unlimited amounts of everything else? Very effective because you only like Swiss cake rolls? You're ruining my analogy. It would not be effective, okay? And right now, the EPA only has the power to approach chemicals like that diet, meaning it can only ban BPA, but not the chemical class bisphenols, meaning there's nothing to stop a company from replacing the BPA currently banned in baby bottles with its close relative, BPS, which appears to be just as, if not more harmful, and then selling it to you in an innocuous BPA-free packaging. I love it here. Okay, well, this has been a real uplifting one, huh? So, is there anything that we can do about any of this? Nope, see you later. No, just because it does feel hopeless when you think about how absolutely everywhere microplastics are. But yes, there are things we can do. As a society, we need to give the EPA the power and resources needed to deal with the scale of this problem. That could look like giving them the ability to ban chemical classes like bisphenols and phthalates so that we stop ending up with BPA-free items that are nothing more than Trojan horses for related chemicals like BPS. We could also institute something like a nutrition label, but for the packaging of our food, because we now know that the packaging is becoming part of our food. That alone might prevent companies from doing things like replacing BPA with BPS, but if not, at least we would be aware of it rather than totally in the dark like we are now. Then I think we need some sweeping legislation to limit the amount of plastics that companies are able to produce because it has gotten totally out of hand. And it turns out the recycling we've been sold that makes all this plastic acceptable is more or less a scam, which is something I might make an entire video about if so many other people hadn't already done a great job. And if you haven't already hit your limit for depressing plastic content for today, you might head over to Climate Town and watch their amazing 8-ish minute video on the subject. And when you do, let them know Brad sent you and that he wants to be friends. And make sure to note that that's not at all a weird way to reach out for social contact. The good news is there are things we can do to limit our exposure as individuals as well. And if enough of us do them together, we could even change the behavior of the companies drowning us in them. Is that sufficiently optimistic for you? All right, what can we do? The number one way microplastics enter our body is through our unintentionally plastic-based diets. But it turns out we can reduce that exposure through an intentionally whole foods-based one. At this point, you've probably heard a long list of health benefits associated with swapping out highly processed foods for whole ones, but go ahead and add to that list that it keeps microscopic petrochemicals out of your little danglers. I'm talking about testicles. That's because the more processed your food is, the more likely it is to come into contact with plastic in the processing of it.
There was a very nice experiment. Farmer milked a cow by hand. Farmer milked the cow with a milking machine. Phthalates in the milking machine milk, no phthalates in the hand milking.
If phthalates are entering something as minimally processed as cow's milk that just happens to be harvested by milking machine rather than by hand, you don't have to be a scientist like Dr. Swan to see how ultra-processed food is likely to contain far more. Not to mention, the more processed a food is, the more plastic packaging that's typically involved, which brings us to our next point. Avoid plastic packaging. Just like the processing of food can contaminate it with microplastics, so does plastic packaging. And this seems to be particularly true of liquids. A recent study found that the amount of microplastics in bottled water is 200 140,000 particles per liter, which is orders of magnitude higher than we previously thought. And if you're thinking about switching from plastic bottles to cans, maybe don't. Because just about every can on the market, be it for beverages or soups, contains a plastic liner on the inside to keep the metal from leaching into your food so that plastic can leach into it instead. So to eliminate the plastic packaging, with foods again, eating whole ones is going to help with that. And with liquids, you can become that guy or gal who carries around your own glass or stainless steel water bottle and is constantly talking about getting another one. I get it. If you plan on having a life outside of the preparation of food, totally avoiding plastic packaging is gonna be really difficult. But when you do use it, don't heat it up. A plastic item marked microwave safe really just means it's not going to melt in there, and heating it up is just gonna speed up the process of it leaching into your cup of noodles. So if you can, pour it into a glass or ceramic bowl and heat it up in there. Please don't put stainless steel in the microwave, I don't want you to die. Unfortunately though, the water you use for that cup of noodles is going to contain microplastics unless you filter your water. The water coming into our homes is full of microplastics, and that's because our city's water systems just aren't sophisticated enough to filter out these tiny particles, and neither are most fridge or pitcher water filters. So if you really want to get them out and lessen your exposure, you're gonna need something like a reverse osmosis water filter. And I know that sucks because these are expensive. The cheapest option I could find on Home Depot's website is $180, and they can get much more expensive than that. But listen, if you subscribe to my channel, help load up, and make me rich, I'll buy you one. Avoid synthetic fibers. Polyester, nylon, acrylic, spandex, rayon. These synthetic fibers are a major reason our water needs filtering. And I hated learning this because last year I spent a bunch of money on new workout clothes that I've been loving, only to realize that every post-workout wash sends millions of microplastics into the water system that ultimately make their way back to my house, into my drink, and upon consumption, end up wearing me, in a way. And I find it particularly upsetting that the workout clothes I've bought to get swollen contain BPA, which can lower my testosterone. Good thing I've got plenty to spare. But I'm not throwing away all my recent purchases. I'm just gonna start slowly phasing them out as my budget allows. And I didn't know until looking, but there actually are a lot of great brands out there making workout clothes out of natural fibers. Like this brand Riker that I got a pair of shorts from, and I love. Why did you watch all that? And before you get your plastic panties in a wad, I want to acknowledge that these solutions I've proposed aren't always easy or inexpensive. Part of why plastics are everywhere is because they're so cheap to produce, and being able to avoid them is a privilege in many ways. But if you are able to avoid them, you stand to lessen your exposure and pressure the companies to make less of them, which helps make things better for everyone who isn't able to make that choice. So now you're not allowed to leave a nasty comment about me sounding like a granola hawking hippie who's totally detached from reality. All right, that's all I got for today, folks, so thank you for watching, and good luck out there avoiding those microplastics. I'd turn the camera off now, but it's also made of plastic, so. Okay, see you next time.